Lexa, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's nice to see you. We've been connected online for quite a while now. How
Like
long have
five
we?
years
Yeah, yeah.
at least.
Do you remember how we met? Because I don't remember exactly how we initially connected. I know it was through mutual connections, but how did we like get to
I'm
know each
pretty
other?
sure it was just social media, I think,
It was
because
so
I was
yeah,
working with Cliff and like you're Cliff's like best friend. So
yeah, yeah. And it's hard. It's when you're in the space, you kind of start to get to know certain people through teams and different things, or even like sharing content, stuff like that. But I've known you for a little bit now, so I'm excited to just get because we've talked on the phone, we've talked through message, but we've never talked face to face. So I'm excited for us to finally be able to get some time here face to face and catch up. So I'm gonna give you an intro because I do find it's kind of hard to give yourself an intro. It's hard to like talk yourself up, but you do have a lot going on. So I want to let the audience know who you are. So uh, starting with you're an athlete. So you're a bikini competitor. You've won shows. You won in your season 2018. You took first, and 2021 you top five. Right now you're in the off season, correct?
yes, perpetual off season for right now.
You know what though? That's good because too many people are just competing back to back and not spending enough time growing or in a off season or perpetual off season. I've taken 5 year off seasons, so I know what that's like. But you also have one thing that's always been interesting is you have a huge uh, research background, and I remember every time I would talk to you, you'd be in some form of school or you'd be working on a thesis or a paper. So you do have a bachelor's in human biology, master's in exercise science. I believe you got like a 4.0 or something.
Yeah.
Like
Just gonna
no,
subtle flex that one.
no, yeah. I mean, because that's another thing too. Like you have a really like A type personality, don't you?
Yeah, I think I identify less with that now than I used to. Like, I feel like that
Okay.
used to be a very big like badge of honor. Like, hell yeah, like I can
Hmm.
work three jobs and college and bodybuild and all of these things. Like, no one can touch me. And I feel like I've let that go a little bit more in the recent years.
Oh, I mean, tell me about that. What caused a shift there, or was there a tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, actually, it's a really interesting journey, I guess, I went through because it was like when we first started talking, I feel like there was a lot of, at least from my like young, like 18-year-old noggin, there was a lot of like just trying to be good enough to fit into the space. So it was like I would learn something from someone and then I would try to put my own twist on it and be like, well, like this is someone that I look up to. So like they can't be wrong. So almost like a little bit of like a dogmatic idealization of other people in the space. And at some point I realized like none of that stuff actually fit me. Like the really hardcore language, the very logical way of going about things, it just didn't really resonate with me at a deep level. So at some point, it was like I was putting out all of these things, and there was like no resonance in myself. So as soon as someone poked it, they were like, "What do you think about this?" It's like, oh, the
Did it
mask almost like
feel for?
falls
Did it
off.
feel forced, or did it feel like fake, or like the imposter syndrome? Like how did it make you feel?
I think the imposter syndrome was always there, and it kind of showed up as this anger about like, oh, like why aren't people seeing me? Like why am I not
Hmm.
the one who's like successful with all of these things that I'm like looking to the outside and wanting? But like I never considered that like what if the way that I want to do it is the right way to do it? Like what if I am the one with like these different ideas that need to be brought forth and I don't need to be part of this echo chamber anymore.
Hmm.
Like everyone knows you need to train hard. Everyone knows there's no way around, discipline to what you want to get done. But maybe there's a different way of going about it than what I was just kind of like mirroring from the outside. So at some point it was more just like this mask fell off, and it didn't feel like it at the time. Like I actually remember one of my friends was like, this does not sound like you. Like when I talk to you as a human being, like face to face, this does not resonate with me. And I got a little angry. I was like, yes, it does. Like, yes, it does. And then at some point, like I recognized it. I was like, oh, that's what she means. And I've just
It was
started
actually more of like a compliment too, probably, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And she I love her. She's amazing and has been really, really helpful for me stepping out into like who I actually am. And like, of course, now that like I do act in the way that does feel very in alignment with me, and I kind of toss aside everything else. Like I've unfollowed all of the coaches that I used to follow on Instagram, like
Mhm.
unfollowed all of the competitors, like really cleared my space to let my own voice come through. And testing all of that on myself as well. So there was a period that I was coachless for a while. And as someone that was working with coaches for like 4 or 5 years, it was like kind of scary to be like, I don't have someone telling me what to do. So what am I supposed to do? And like figuring it out for myself and like
Mhm.
feeling into it in real time. So that was like a really long-winded.
That's great because also I want to mention that you are a coach and you do coach many different people and your athletes are successful. So I'm wondering, did that add to your coaching arsenal being able to coach yourself for those couple of years?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I've completely changed how I go about coaching because at some point, like if I've been in school for 7 years, it's
I
like
remember talking
I
to you too. I'd be like, because like I've always hated school. Like when I was in school, and I'm not just talking about college, so when I was in high school, I went to 3 high schools. So I got expelled from my first 2 high schools. And I went and I graduated from a boarding school in Massachusetts. I'm from Indiana. So like my first 2 schools were just regular schools in Indiana. And then I when I got expelled from my second one, I had to go to boarding school in Massachusetts. And when I was in school, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, if I don't pass this or if I don't do this, I'm going to fail and have to repeat. So even then I had to like toe the line with how much I could get away with and how
mm,
much schoolwork I didn't have to do because I hated it. Whenever I was in school, I felt like I was in jail. And that
mm,
carried over to college. So like when I was in college, my whole thing was I was going to graduate and go to work with my family business. I wanted to just go straight to work, but my dad was like, "Nah, you're not doing that. That's like not happening." He's like, "Unless you graduate, you're not coming to work here." And so he like basically forced me to graduate college. But whenever I was like forced to be somewhere, I I always felt like I was in prison and I needed to get out. Like I just felt like I was in a cage. And so that's kind of like why I've always had like admiration for people that just absolutely take the shit seriously, that crush it with school, that like you said, 7 years. I remember like every time I talk to you, I'd be like, damn, you're still in school. Like that is, respect. Like, and my sister-in-law, she's a lawyer. And even my my stepsister was a nurse. And they're just never ending in school. Like it just never stopped. And anytime you talk to them, they'd be in the library, they'd be studying, stressed to the max, like so much stress. Like they're just so stressed all the time. And so I always had respect and admiration for people that were able to just keep going and see that through. And I remember that about you. I remember you were always in school, it seemed like.
Yeah, and with that too, it's like if I'm gonna be there for that long, like at some point, like you don't really learn new stuff. It's like you get a nice little twist on something, you're like, oh, I didn't look at it from that perspective. But it's like there's only so many ways that you can learn how to build muscle, you know? It's like
Yes.
at some point, or like the energy system. So like you can only learn about the Krebs cycle so many times. And then
Yeah.
at that point, everything kind of becomes boring. So I honestly like got that through my master's. I was like sitting in class and like learning these things and I was like, oh, like I kind of already know this, not in like an arrogant way, but just in a way that I'm not being stimulated in the way that I used to or the way that I feel like
Mhm.
I need to be progressing forward. Underlying being like I need a master's degree to be good enough as a coach. Like that was like kind
Mhm.
of like my underlying thought process. um so with that, like there's not really like a new way to invent the wheel. And from my perspective, it was like, okay, like what can I learn? Like what am I noticing in real time with my clients? And it's like I realized that there was a communication gap, you know, and the biggest thing in relationships and like coach athlete or coach client relationships, like they have to be in unison for things to work. So
Mhm.
I started getting more into like psychology. I started getting more into relationship dynamics. Side note, if you are a coach, I do recommend like reading like parenting books or like relationship books as far as like communication styles. That's been really, really helpful for me. And also social psych. And I've noticed that those things have been what have made a really big difference in the in not in just the progress, because like the progress was happening regardless, but more in the experience that people were having while they were going through the process. So that all ties together with like how I was going through things in myself, because it's like, oh, like I don't want to do this type of training anymore. Why is that? And then
What
like
type of
going down that.
training were you doing? And then what type of training did that observation lead to?
Yeah, so at the height of like my hardcore bodybuilding style, it was
Yeah.
like everything. My friends literally used to call me RPE 13 Lexa. Like I was like so in it and just like did not have a stopping point.
Were you
And
obsessive?
yeah, and I was having these like I've never really had like temper tantrums, but like if a lift didn't go my way, like I've literally like thrown my lifting belt across the gym, which
Would
is
you really?
it has never been part of my personality. So it's like, and I would like literally cry. I would like have this like anger crying happening.
Would
And it's like,
people like were there people in the gym when they would see it or
yeah. And they just kind of do the little like, what's happening here. Um, so
was
with
that like
that, it
on
was
like the big lifts or was it you could just be on like doing a extension feel
yeah, I
have
remember
that
it was an
happen?
RDL. Like it was an RDL and I was going for
Okay.
like a PR with like a little less than two plates. And my coach was like, I want this many reps this week. And I didn't get that many reps this week. Like the first one felt like shit. And I was like, I was just so angry that it didn't go well. And I had to go to him and be like, hey, I failed. Like I didn't get what you wanted me to get. And at that point, like I literally was just like sitting by myself and I was like, okay, like something is wrong here. Like I'm not
Mhm.
enjoying my training. I'm not enjoying the way that I'm like presenting myself. Like this doesn't even feel like me. And you know, we can talk about like self-determination
I
theory and
bet
like
there was a lot of stress involved when like something like that, like when you go into the gym with that type of um expectation, looking at because like each training, you don't look at each training session as a success or a failure. But if you're going in with that type of, outlook,
mentality.
I bet going to the gym became like very stressful.
It was very high stakes. It was very serious. And like when I
Mm-hmm.
say the word like disciplined in the way, not in the way that we just like kind of throw that word around in bodybuilding, but in like a like discipline of myself to in like almost like corporal punishment kind of way.
I could see
It
why
was
you
just
got a
getting
4.0.
yeah, and that's why I was like, I'm letting go of that now.
Yeah,
But
right.
it doesn't really like align with me. It was all of this like external motivation, like fear of something happening, and then like rushing towards like a perceived reward that I didn't already have yet,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So in
Mm-hmm.
my training, just to like sum that up, it was very intense. It was very high stakes. It was all or nothing. And I was not enjoying it at all. And then like at some point I started having these like little nagging like overuse injuries coming up. And at that point, like I needed to take a break. I needed to rest a little bit because I was actually like hurting myself. Like I had like back issues and like hip issues and my shoulder was weird and like all of these things that and I'm like young. So this is not not normal. Um,
No, definitely
so
not. Not that you don't, like if you're pushing it, you're gonna have aches and you're gonna have pains, of course, but you're not gonna get hurt. Like you're not gonna
Yeah. And
tear some, you know, you'd have to really be it would have to be a fluke or be irresponsible or something for something like that to be happening consistently.
yeah, so at that point it was like I was ignoring all of the signs in my body being like, hey, this isn't for you. Like you can't do this forever. And I needed to kind of like take a step back. And when I did that, I do what a lot of people in the bodybuilding space do, which isn't my favorite way to go about it, but it's more like I stepped completely back. It was like, okay, like I'm not tracking anything anymore. I'm like not even going to have a set training plan. And that actually like did work for me for a little while because it gave me the spaciousness to explore like what does feel good. Not in a sense that like, oh, I'm casting everything to the wind and like I'm going to go binge on Taco Bell every other
Right.
day and like all of these pieces. It's like I still had like the knowledge of someone who takes care of themselves for 5 years, 5 plus years, all that fun stuff, but it came from a different place of like, okay, I don't want to have to completely sacrifice myself for what I'm trying to get, and opening myself up to the possibility of, again, like, what if I need to do it a different way to get the result? And that was one of the things that I loved about Cliff too, because one of the things that I learned from him is he was never the biggest guy in the gym, and he had to like try out all of the things to find what was like working for him instead of just like listening to all the big dogs who already had all the muscle and all these things. So
Mhm.
going that route and going from more a how does this feel, how does this connect, where did all of these beliefs come from? So it was a complete like deconstruction and then rebuilding on top of that, which has honestly taken a couple of years. And going back to the coaching thing, it's like when I'm doing these things for myself, I start to notice all of the similar patterns in my athletes. Because, of course, my athletes want to work with me. And if they want to work with me, they're attracted to something that I'm doing and they want to emulate something in that realm. So it's like, of course, we have the same issues. Of course, I'm attracting people that are like so disciplined they cannot listen to their own body signals. Like, absolutely. So it's when I went on that thing and I started opening up to like, oh, there's a lot of dysfunction here, actually. That needs to be addressed, or else like these girls are going to burn out. You see it in bodybuilding. Like you see people who
Yeah.
compete for like 3 to 5 years, and then all of a sudden they're intuitive eating, and then they're like,
So
bodybuilding is
that's
not
a
for me
pretty
anymore.
common thing to see.
Yeah.
And I don't think that everyone has the self-awareness that you do in terms of you do have a lot of experience and you do know what you're feeling, and there's more than one way to skin a cat, so like you can still make progress in a completely different approach. I mean, that approach of going by feel, that's not a bad approach if you're in touch with what you're feeling, because like you said, you didn't just quit. Like that's kind of where, you know, on a spectrum from like 0 to 100, let's say you were at 100, some people will just go to 0 and say, I can't
Yeah.
take this at all. And you see that very people burn out. Like that is enough to burn out, and then also just become such a bad thing that they don't even want anything to do with bodybuilding or hypertrophy or any fitness in general. They're just like, okay, I'm going to go the completely other way. So having the self-awareness to go work intuitively and to make progress intuitively, I can see why a lot of people would relate to that. And especially if you're talking the same language, like, oh, okay, so she went through this. I went through this. She looks like this. Oh, maybe I could look like this. Or she seems to have found a, you know, an approach that works for this personality, because you know there is just a different approach for everybody. I always say that like fitness is so dependent on the person and the personality that everyone has their perfect regimen out there. Everyone has their perfect approach out there. I really believe that there is an approach for everyone. Like my approach is not going to work for everybody. You know, doing all of the like people what they would deem obsessive, I deem as like I enjoy it. Like that works for me. I love doing all of this stuff. I love all of the little details and eking out every little possible thing that I can for my physique. And that's the goal. That's it. Tunnel vision. it doesn't stress me out. I love it. It would be harder for me not to do it. And I think that approach, in terms of enjoyment, is out there for everybody. It's going to look different for everyone, and it could be, from the training, from the from the from the approach to the mindset to the tracking. All of that is going to look different for each person. But I do think if you keep at it and you don't just quit, that you will find that approach. And that's something that you have found. And it's cool that now you're passing down your wisdom to your athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say too, like with the style that you have, like that was also for me at some point. Like I really did enjoy that for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as everyone having like a perfect approach out there for them, like I want to say that there's numerous like perfect approaches for
Mm-hmm.
people, because people are going to change throughout time. Like there's not like a stagnant piece. It's like maybe sometimes like you need this style of training, you need this level of discipline for what you want to get done. And then other times, like throughout your life, like maybe like you don't actually need that anymore. It served its purpose. You can move on to the next thing, whatever that might be. Like obviously, like with a beginner, like if you've never lifted a weight before, like there's a certain level of skill that you need to develop, and probably a certain level of rigidity when you first start to like make sure you don't get injured and all of those, and actually like learn where your muscles are and what you're using and when. So like training for a beginner obviously would feel very, very different for someone like me who's been training since they were like 16.
When did you start? Yeah, when did you? So I have a question for you. You said you started training at 16 years old, weight training at 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, talk about being ahead of the game. What got you into training? Like what was was it a low point? Was it just a curiosity? Like what is there a story behind how you got into training?
Yeah, actually, my mom used to, she wanted to bodybuild once upon a time. So she would like drag me to the gym with her every
Oh
once in a
yeah.
while. And then at some point, like it was like, I just wanted to. We had all the weights in the basement, like, why not? So I literally, like, I remember I was like, can I have this booty building workout, please? And like, literally, like, my mom was like, can I have this? And she was like, I mean, I can write you one. I was like, no, I want this one because marketing is really good.
Yeah.
So ever since then, that's kind of like been my thing. And it's been the only thing that I felt competent at in that point in my life. Like I was never really an athlete, but I really enjoyed being able to go in the gym and like feel something in real time, like happening. Like you get like if you do like a bunch of hip thrusts, like you're gonna feel it in your glutes.
Were you so when you were 16, you're what, a sophomore in high school?
Yeah, sophomore or junior. I think
Were
I was
you
a year
like
ahead.
were you seeing like influencers and stuff like that? Was that
Yeah,
part
so
of
that was like
the culture?
right or yeah, it was right around the IIFYM time. So there was this like
Okay.
one girl that I remember like I really resonated with. And she I think also had her bachelor's in exercise science and all that stuff too. So it was yeah, there was like the rise of influencers was coming up when I was like in school still.
Did you find
And
that to be like a benefit or a detriment?
I found it to be a benefit at that
Okay.
point. I didn't really have like, oh my gosh, like I look so terrible. Like, that was never like something that was in like for me, I came from a very, very skinny background, like very lean people like, are you anorexic? You know how people are in high school.
Yeah, right.
But I never really had like that issue where I was like, I need to be different. That came later. Like it didn't like I didn't avoid that one altogether. It was just like it didn't start that way, which I'm very grateful for because it didn't come from a place of like I need to be different in order to get X. It kind of morphed into that, which is really interesting me saying out loud because now I've kind of like come back to the origins.
Yeah, kind of come full circle. So what that was your approach then. What is your approach now? So where did that journey take you? And what did, your experiences lead you to in terms of now your training, nutrition, energy, things like that?
Yes. So for my current approach, I am actually working with a coach just to get some like health things on the
Mhm.
back end solid. But that's only for the next like couple of months, and then I'm actually going to go back to self coaching for the next year or so.
Did you prefer self-coaching? Like what was your what did you have a preference?
I actually did enjoy it. It felt like the most custom coaching that I was ever able
Yeah.
to provide because like you
Yeah.
can feel things in real time. And like, of course, there is such a thing as like too much feedback. And like having the ability to like discern like what I do and do not need in each moment is definitely a skill that I've been able to develop. But I really enjoyed learning to like intuitively train. That is something that like I don't think a lot of people talk about right now. And it's like it's not just like when I say the word intuitive, I feel like a lot of people equate that to like mindless. Like intuitive eating usually means like mindless eat. Like I don't want to think about it. I'm just gonna like eat whatever and just like not focus on macros and like avoid all of the like nutrient content in all of these things. Or training is like I'm just gonna go in and like do whatever. But it's really like letting what you're drawn to guide where you're going. So it's like using that internal voice because signals are there for a reason. It's not like they're just, you know, they're just there to say hello and leave. It's like, no, like the signals that your body gives to you are very important. That's why we ask biofeedback questions and as a coach. So taking those in real time, feeling what did and did not feel good, learning to use my muscle groups in a way that I didn't even consider because everything was more rigid previously, like exploring new movements. So it really just like shattered, I guess, like all of the walls.
Would you get like freaked if like let's say you got to an RDL and that RDL, you know how it is. Sometimes you could have a movement that you like on Monday and by Wednesday you seems like you can't feel this movement for the life of you.
Yeah, which I honestly think is normal.
Yeah,
Like I
it's
don't think
totally normal. Would that like back then, would that like really throw you off? Like, is that something that you would like? And now it's like you're in the RDL, you're one set in, and you just this thing sucks right now. Like, so like if you're being intuitive or just working on the fly, or even let's say that whatever machine you're using is taken and there's no end in sight for that. Well, you're gonna move on to something similar. Would that cause an issue back then, or was it not that quite that intense?
there were definitely times when like things just like didn't feel good and I would again like kind of like freak out, like have a mini little freak out, but it's more like, okay, like what actually would feel good for me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And feeling into that because usually like sometimes it's nothing. Like sometimes that means the training session needs to be over and it's just not going to happen today. And there's no good, bad. Like it's like, okay, like this is not clicking. Maybe I just need a rest day and I wasn't listening to that and that's fine. Other times it's like, oh, like actually maybe like an RDL like with a barbell doesn't feel good, but how about like on the cable? Maybe that would feel better for me. And just opening up to different possibilities. And that for me has been incredible because like there's only like you said, there's numerous ways to like skin the cat. Like you can get there in so many different capacities and you're really only like limited by your creativity at that point.
And sometimes it just feels good. Like sometimes you go in, like sometimes you'll go in and I'm like, I don't feel like tracking my weights today. I don't feel like busting out my journal here and just obsessing. Sometimes I just want to blast some heavy metal or some dubstep or whatever, get crazy and just go nuts for this training session. There's nothing wrong with that. Like that's
No.
completely fine. So I think a lot of times I think that approach of like just of working intuitively works really well in some scenarios. I can see where that would bring a totally different perspective. Even for example, like let's say you're having pain, right? You know, pain for whatever, shoulder pain, whatever. Well, I'm not gonna sit there and just like be like, all right, I'm just gonna go through my plan. Like this whole plan needs to get adjusted, and it may need to get adjusted on the fly. So being in touch with that, I think, is something I think it's a skill for one. And I think a lot of people, that's probably why a lot of people come to you is because they see how far you've come. And you did start training at a like that training at 16. That's not really that normal, I don't think. Like starting that young is not that normal. That's huge. Like being able to gain that experience and start, because you know how it is when you first start training, like you're just making mistakes. Like you just, even like this podcast, like we were just talking before we started filming, like this first year, 2 years is going to be just brutal when you look back on it, because this is where you make all your mistakes when you like, I think bodybuilding is a good analogy for anything.
Yeah.
Like starting anything, like you start at the bottom and you make mistakes and you fumble, and that's how you gain knowledge and experience. And a lot of times that comes from learning what not to do because you made those mistakes.
Yeah,
And
I want to
so,
pause you there actually.
yeah.
So with that too is one of the things that we wanted to talk about. You saying that like when you start with bodybuilding, you start at the bottom. Like you're not expected to know everything. And like you and I know that. And at the same time, what I see going on in the fitness space right now, that is not the case. There is this idea that like athletes either have it or they don't. Like you are hardcore enough to like train to RPE 13 all the time and never go a gram of rice over on your foods, or you don't want it bad enough. You're not a good enough athlete. There isn't a lot of space, at least in the circles that I used to run in.
Can you
There isn't.
elaborate on that? Like, can you give an example of that, or maybe tell a story behind that? I know what you mean, but I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that.
I think it's honestly like the gist of it, to be honest, is just everything is yes or no. It is black or
Mhm.
white. Like you are hardcore enough to never go over, never, make a mistake, never ask questions, always, just like do exactly what is written on your plan. This is a lot of the coaching style that I've seen. It's
Okay.
like, oh, like you fell off, like just get back on next week or don't even bother checking it. Like there's a lot of that, especially in like NPC IFBB bodybuilding,
Hmm.
which I thought I needed to do to fit in with the best of the best, but I that does not resonate with me at all. Does that help or
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
so with that, like recognizing that people are going to grow and accepting that one, like people are perfect the way that they are right now. Like they have all of the knowledge, they're doing the absolute best they can with what's available to them, and that this is going to change in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and leaving space for that evolution to happen. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that is leading to this burnout that we were talking about is people expecting and feeling like they have to be a perfectly formed athlete when a lot of people entering bodybuilding probably don't have athletic backgrounds. It's a very
No,
low
and
barrier to entry.
yeah, that seems like a great way to just burn yourself out very quickly, which you do see. I mean, how
Yep.
frequently do you see both athletes, coaches, people in the space? They show up and as quick as they came, they're gone. And that is big, when you're all in like that, because you know how it is. I don't care who the person is, something's going to come up where you need some flexibility. That like all in type of like obsessive, because that's obsessive, that obsessive mindset, that's not good. Even that's going to make you a worse athlete.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not
Because
having
what
any interest outside of bodybuilding, that means you're just going to overcomplicate things. You're going to focus too much on it, and it's not sustainable.
no, absolutely not. And there's like so many rabbit holes I could go with this one because it's something that I'm
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about. But this is the style that I'm personally like moving away from because like in any research that you read on psychology, shame does not work.
Mm-hmm.
Shaming someone for being, not the way that you have in your vision is never going to lead to long-term sustainable positive change. Like that all you're doing is strengthening the extrinsic motivational factors of trying to run away from punishment and running towards reward instead of just doing something because you want to, because it's already within you that you enjoy it. Self-determination theory like 101. So a lot of that style of coaching takes away the autonomy. It takes away the belonging on the inside because if you don't already have that, then something must be wrong with you. You must be not hardcore enough. You must not have a why. You must be competing just for clout to be on Instagram. All of these assume that people have bad intentions, and
Mm-hmm.
I just don't view people or the world that way. It's more just like, okay, like this is where you're coming from. Maybe we actually don't know how to have a good level of intensity in training yet. Perfect. That's where we start. And it's allowing space for these things
And
to
that's where
happen.
the coaching comes in too. Like if every single person is just like, here, do this, don't ask questions. You're either in or you're out, and you either go and do all of this 100% all the time or you're kicked out, where is the nuance here? Where is the coaching? Where is the change for the individual? That's completely non-existent. So that's just like, it's, yeah, that's completely backwards. And both you and I know too, to kind of go back to something you were saying, some of the worst advice and the worst information comes from some of the people that look the best. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think people underestimate how much genetics play a role in things. And I have seen anecdotally and experienced many times, by and large, most a lot of people who look the part don't actually know what they're doing. So a lot of figuring that stuff out comes from, okay, maybe I'm not so genetically blessed. Maybe I do have to dig deep to find out what not just works for me, but what works for the human body. Like how do I, take advice from someone that went from looking from shitty to just all right. They look pretty good. That person, I guarantee, knows a lot than the person who just always looked incredible. Like you could even go back to high school and you're like, damn, they had like all these muscle insertions and all these crazy cuts, and then they become a bodybuilder. So I think we can both agree that we've seen a lot of terrible coaching, a lot of terrible advice from people who really look impressive.
Yeah, and even if those styles of coaching do get you results, I'm not saying that they don't. Like with like beginners, as we know, you can give them pretty much anything and there's going to be
Yeah.
positive change,
You could do a
which
lot
is
wrong and get a lot for it in the beginning.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's more like what is happening internally that we are picking up on. Like, what is your internal experience? What are you learning? Like, what are you correlating to this progress, the success? Because if the entire time you're doing things that you don't want to do, like you're pushing aside all of your intuition, you don't go out with friends anymore, you don't have any of the things that you used to appreciate. If you have to do it to get it, you have to do it to keep it. That's the thought. So it's like, oh no, if I have this amazing transformation for 6 months and then I didn't go out one time, I turned off my intuition, my digestion has been terrible. I like have no emotion. I don't know what I'm doing in the gym. You're going to carry that with you into the next phase of what you're doing. So the biggest thing for me has been the experience of what my athletes have been going through. It's like, how does this feel for you? How is this journey going? What are you learning? What are these beliefs? And then when something comes up and it's like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't do this lift today, or like this one just didn't click and like I didn't hit this PR, and like we can actually talk about that and be like, why is this such a big deal for you? Not in a way that like, why is it such a big deal for you? Like
Right.
shaming you for it, but just like, it's really interesting that like everything has been going really well for weeks, and now this one movement is kind of like bothering you. That's really interesting. Like where do you think that is coming from? And providing more spaciousness for that experience to happen, because those little hiccups are where we learn the most. Those hiccups are like us getting literally stuck on an old belief of ours that we can have a chance to like rewire, reprogram, like deconstruct in some other way to something that actually will serve us long term.
And then your clients need to feel safe and like they can give you feedback. If someone just rules with an iron fist, you're not going to hear a lot about what's going on because they're not going to want to tell you. So they'll start doing things on their own or start holding things back. And so it makes the whole ironic thing around that approach, that hardcore approach. And I think most bodybuilders have at least gone a little bit doing that. Like I think that, right? Like you've done that before. And I've done that before.
Say, we're not against effort. Like
right.
I am not against like you training hard because you want to, because you are curious about that next level that you could reach, because it feels really good. And like you have that drive for yourself.
That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about like pushing yourself to your limit. That's not what we're talking. We're talking about something becoming an unhealthy, unmanageable obsession to the point where you become a worse athlete. And a worse person. Like it'll make you a worse person too. So like we've all oh, go ahead.
Because with that, like you end up dissociating from the process. Like you really do turn into a robot. Like if you're
Mm.
turning off all of the internal things that do not align with what your coach or what you believe has to happen for you to achieve X goal, then you lose all internal sensation and internal drive. And then that's when we have these like injuries that we don't know where they came out. We don't know where that happened. Like how did this come up? Like when your body's actually been like, excuse me, this hurts for weeks and you didn't listen to it the entire time.
Right. Because yeah, and that's like you're just being stubborn and you're just not, I mean, a part of being a good athlete is knowing when to step on the gas, but also knowing when to step on the brakes too, because there is
And
definitely a time for that.
and part of being a good coach is allowing both of those to be good options, to be
Right.
acceptable options. And this is one of the things that when I first started talking about in the space, like I literally had like these really like 260-pound bodybuilders being like, "You're what's wrong with bodybuilding," which I disagree. But it's really interesting how this is really threatening to a lot of people in the space. And
Someone would say that to you, like someone said that to you, like on what, online or something?
yeah, they just like reposted my stuff and they're like, "This is what's wrong with bodybuilding." I'm like, okay, cool.
Really? Do you get like any trolling online, like, or anything like
Um,
that?
Not as much lately. Like when I first started like stepping out of what I had created to be my little space, like I fit in, like I'm part
Yeah.
of the group, guys. And then I was like, actually, maybe I'm gonna step a little bit outside of this. That's when I got most of it. But now I feel like most of my stuff is so outside of it that people
You
either
know
just like
what
really
though?
resonate or they leave it.
Yeah, right, right. Um, you know what though has what was always I thought admirable about you and your approach and the content that you produce. So your content is very thought provoking, very meaningful. There's a lot of information behind it. You provide a lot of value, and you go the completely other direction of a lot of people in the space. You don't use your body to gain followers and to gain like you know, and I know that if you wanted to, you could make a quick gain in tons of followers if you went that other direction that a lot of Fitspo people do. And you have always used your information, not that you don't show your physique, but you put out a ton of education and you're always putting a lot of work into the value that you provide in the online space. How does that play a role in your world? Like, how do you feel about the space that we're in, where there is a quick grab if you want to, you know, play the social media game, and especially like with women showing their physique?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to say that like to me, it doesn't necessarily like matter too much how people like choose to display themselves. Like I genuinely support whatever feels really good for that person because that's the only thing that I really care about for me. Like I personally don't post anything that doesn't resonate in me anymore. That doesn't feel important. That doesn't feel like it's going to connect with someone. I don't care. Like I used to, like I think I posted this yesterday. I used to get like 600, like likes on my pictures and stuff like that when it was, more like just me as an athlete and, like photo shoots and things like that. And like sure, like I had good captions behind them. Like I always put something underneath it, but how many people were actually connecting with it? And now it's more like strictly, not strictly, but it's grown into what am I passionate about? What am I seeing? And I just want to share that. And it doesn't really matter to me if people connect with it or not. Like my engagement is trash now. I don't like because it's like you go from something that's like so high because it was like I had this like previous mask on, like I talked about. And then when you take it off and people aren't used to that, people don't know like what the real me is. And then all of a sudden I start showing up differently. Like I understand that's going to be, polarizing in some sense. It's going to be different than what was expected of me. So it doesn't really like influence me at all, like how many likes or shares or things like that. But the people that it resonates with, it really resonates with.
Do you
People it
feel like
doesn't,
the
don't stick
connections
around.
that you're making online are a little bit more genuine now with the content that you're putting out?
I would definitely say so. I would say that it feels sometimes like there's a little bit higher barrier to entry. Um, to talk to me because I realized that like looking back on my messaging, like I did have a more authoritative tone. Like I said, like previously, I tried to really fit in with that style, and now it's more like this is what I think and this is what I see, and like if you relate, like let me know. And it
So
feels,
more like what you're like in person.
I would say so. I mean, I personally have always resonated with being a good writer. Like I think that's one of the things. Like speaking is not my my forte. Like I've had a speech impediment for a long time,
You
so it's a
have?
little, yeah, actually.
I didn't know that. What's your speech, if you don't mind me asking?
It's just like I stutter a lot and
Oh,
I
really?
stumble
I didn't.
over.
I've never noticed.
Oh, well, thank you. I've worked really hard to try to to not do that. So anyway, like I've really always dived into my writing. Like that's always
Mhm.
been the route that's been the most comfortable, and like I'm really proud of how I write. So I could definitely do a better job of speaking to people and actually like opening that up, because when you see a face and you see someone smiling at you and you see someone talking and waving their hands around like I do, I feel like people are
Do you
more
find
open to.
do you find it hard to like get in front of a camera, like like do the
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely. It's so
it
strange to
is
me.
it's strange, isn't it? I've always felt like it's strange. What do you think is strange about it? I'm interested to hear that, because I have thoughts on it, but like what's strange about doing that?
It doesn't feel like I'm talking to someone. Like it feels like I'm actually trying to talk to the masses, whereas where I'm actually like communicating to a single person, like I can tailor it around the conversation that I'm trying to have. And when I'm writing, it's like I'm writing for myself. It's
Mhm.
like sure, like I'm writing in a context of like what other people would resonate with or have an understanding about. So it's not like I'm completely off the walls, like crazy, like you have no idea what's going on. But it feels personable. So maybe that's something that I can work to bring into my camera time
Yeah,
where I'm
it's
just trying to be.
something weird about seeing yourself in your reflection when you're talking and having a time limit. So, like I was saying, so this we're just talking. Like this we're just kind of going like a normal conversation. Like you say something, I say something, we go back and forth. Like we're just talking. When you're like on that platform and you're filming yourself and you're making a video, you have like a millisecond to talk. It's you're long-winded and I'm long-winded. So that getting all of your points out in that time, and that in combination with like seeing yourself, I find that to be so unusual. And like if like I don't have a problem talking. Like if I go into like uh, a stranger's house, like I could talk. If I go into a store and I run into someone, I could talk. If I'm at a wedding or whatever, I could talk. I mean, I like it, but I could talk. That throws me off. It's like in theory it should be easy, but it's not. I don't know what, and some people are good at it. Like that's some, I think it's probably one of those things that take practice. Like it's one of those things, like if you're so used to it, it's probably uh very good or very a skill that you could improve on, but I also find that part very difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
So tell me about I mean we were talking about the training, and I know also like femininity and masculinity play a role in different energies and how that affects programming. I'm interested in hearing about that in terms of like your approach to training, but also I think it's an interesting topic in general, like masculinity and femininity, because I'm sure that plays a role in every area of life. So how does that work in the programming?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for a little context, I this past year I've been getting my yoga teacher certification. So, and like also going through the
You just can't
relationships.
stop going to classes, can you? You gotta have
That one
always
actually was
gotta. No,
just
I'm
for
just
fun.
kidding.
Like that one genuinely, like I went and I was like, this is so interesting. Like I really enjoy it. So that's another tangent. But learning more about that and going into like tantric yoga and things like that, it's very, there is an emphasis on like masculine and feminine energies. And basically what that means. So if anyone's ever seen like the yin yang symbol, like that's what that is. So like if you don't like the term like masculine and feminine and that feels too tied to like societal expectations and like gender roles and things like that. Like you can also use yang for masculine, yin for feminine. You can use solar for masculine, lunar for feminine. They're the same thing. It's basically just the duality that we see in nature. So you have like the opposite poles that are actually the same thing at the end of the day. So when we talk about the masculine and feminine, just as a very quick, like, what are they? Like the masculine is going to be more of this hot, like solar, logical, driven, confident, boundary container oriented energy. It's going to be more of the witnessing thing. So it's the one that like watches what's going on. So more of like the outside view. And then the feminine is the more intuitive, creative, internal, emotional, or more experiencing energy. That's going to be like what's happening inside. So I first started applying this to my training because if I looked at it, like my masculine and feminine were like all messed up. Like my feminine was completely gone in the sense that I was not having an internal experience.
Was that leading into like any areas outside of training as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It ties into everything. And I really like that I've started using training as a movement practice, as a way to like come deeper into myself, and like learn more, explore more, instead of it having this be like this external program and this thing that I'm doing. It's turning into a way of being instead. So for my personal feminine experience, like I said, I didn't really have any internal sensations during training. And if I did, they were all negative. They were all like, this hurts.
What was your
sucks.
self-talk like? Like what, like in, like, let's say you're in a training session, right? Because like when you're training, like, do you talk to yourself? Because I talk to myself. Like I will like, like, I mean, if I'm getting hyped up, I'll be like, you motherfucker, this motherfucker's going up. Like, this is going up. Or like, if I'm in a set, I'm like, I know there's like weird things where I'll be like, if you get this last one, like as I'm going, I'm like, if you, and it's going up and it's barely on, but in my head, I'll like be like, if you get this, then this happens. Like, and I'll pick some outlandish thing that would never happen, like some weird thing. But it's just this internal talk, or like, I mean, I'm like, I'll call myself like, oh, you motherfucker, like this is going up, like you have no options, like this is happening right now, like, so like there's self-talk. Like, was that going on, like, does that go on in your world? Like, what is that self-talk like?
Previously it used to be like just a very like, this needs to happen, like no other option. And the concept of good enough was always like in my head, like, is this enough? Now I would say that I don't really have much self-talk. It's more like taking the observer role of like, it's really interesting that this doesn't feel good right now, or it's really interesting that this sensation is coming up when I do only push movements. So it's a very
observational.
Yeah, which I appreciate, because it doesn't feel as personal. Like I'm still the person, of course, like having the experience, and I'm still very in tune with what's going on at all times, but it doesn't feel like it says anything about me. It just says like, this is the current context of what's happening, and like, that's really interesting. Like, why might this be? Or like, what could I do to support this experience that I'm having right now? Or like, do I just need to sit with it for a hot minute? Like, let it have its time in the sun, and then and then we can go back.
And this is what you would consider masculine? Is this in that realm?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
Very great.
Gotcha.
So the masculine.
And I'm learning too. Like this was something that I was really looking forward to talking about, just because I get interested in this kind of stuff, just in like, even in relationship dynamics, like when that polarity is off, things are all off. Yeah. I mean, if you have a relationship and we'll say one partner, like let's say the woman is being like overbearingly masculine, the male will then start to take on some more feminine roles, and there's a polarity that shifts, and over time I think that could be detrimental. So like when I'm thinking about like just balance, polarity, like that, the topic in general has always intrigued me, just because it's like one of those things where you can go out into the world and see it. You could just, if you like people watch and you just watch people, you go to the airport, go to the mall or whatever, and just watch people. You can see polarity. You can see it. It's tangible. It's visible. So it's something that has just the topic in general, just the conversations around it have always intrigued me. So I was really looking forward to hearing like your thought process, your
Yeah.
opinions, the way that you go about things, and just the approach in general.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with the masculine part being the more witnessing energy, previously, I'm just trying to like, I guess, talk about the previous, and then we can kind of, which was for me like completely wounded, like meaning that there was like some gaps and things that weren't really serving me in any way. Or I mean it was, but not in a way that is in alignment anymore. So with the masculine, it was very judgmental. It was very shaming. It was very critical. So it was saying whatever experience that I was having was not good enough, which the feminine energy does not like. The feminine wants to be seen, it wants to be experienced, it wants to be felt. And for me to be always like, this isn't enough, or like just like not even recognizing the feelings, it was a very wounded masculine energy of me, in the sense that I could not hold the experience that I was having, and I was always looking for it to be something different. So if we're talking about relationship dynamics, it'd be like you being in a relationship with someone and then always like sidestepping, looking for what's better. Like that's not going to feel good for your other partner at all. So those are what I would kind of call the wounded energies. So just to summarize, the masculine being this more judgmental, critical, hyper vigilant, over competitive, aggressive, um, shameful energy. And then the wounded feminine, which is, I didn't actually get to this point, but I've seen it a lot in people that do burn out, is more this energy of not being able to take responsibility. So it usually shows up in this victim mentality that everything happens, it's always looking to the outside. And it's always everything happens to me, and I do not have any power or control over my experience, which, you know, you kind of see this with people who just like something always comes up in their life. Something is always happening. The reason that they can't hit their macros, you know, their goldfish had a heart attack, you know, like there's like a lot of things that just randomly, like the most crazy things. You're like, this
I
is this.
get, I know exactly what you're saying.
So
Yeah,
that's
some
usually,
people's lives are just uh, very chaotic and very eventful.
yeah.
And
And then the other side of that is also the
mhm.
people pleasing, which in coaching is rampant because everyone wants to be like the like golden sheep or whatever in their in their clients like rosters, like for their coaches. They want to be this like perfect athlete that always shows up and always does exactly what they're supposed to. And like you want to open my check-in. And it's so interesting because when you have that idea and like you're trying to people please your coach, it's like, one, like this is a service that you guys are entering into together. Like it's a relationship that you guys are trying to foster together to get you to a certain end goal or to an end experience that you'd like to have. But if you are trying to people please and you're just neglecting everything that's going on the outside for the outside feedback and just always being a mirror to what the other person wants to see, then like no one really sees you in general. So those are the two. Does that make sense for
Mhm.
the wounded feminine?
Mhm.
So when I start talking about these things and then saying, like, how can we start expressing this in a healthy way through your training? So it doesn't need to be through your training. You can do it in a different way if you'd like. However, when I notice with my athletes that there is more wounded masculine energy mostly, and then the feminine is just kind of like neglected and ignored and like not wanted in almost any capacity because it's, you know, like soft energy and like you can't do anything with that, which is definitely not true because feminine energy is also very powerful. Like if we look in, you know, like history and we look at deities and like goddesses and all of these things, like there are some scary scary feminine energy figures out there who do have this rage and the power to destroy. So when we start opening up that box of like what would the feminine expression look like, feel like, it can be very intense. It's like almost like if you leave a puppy in an apartment for like a month and then you come back and like it wants to eat you because it hasn't had food. Like that's kind of the same experience that you might have after neglecting it for a long time. So when you do start listening to it in training, it's pretty intense. Like if you've shut down all of your sensations, I'll talk in my perspective. If I've shut down all of my sensations internally and then I'm starting to feel again, when my capacity for feeling has been here, but the actuality of my experience has been like 20 million times bigger than that, and I cannot hold it at that time, you need to develop your capacity. You need to start increasing the amount that you can hold in your body. And that takes a very healthy masculine to do, to be
so
able
when
to.
so when when people contact you, would you say that they're mostly at a low point when they're reaching out and when they're exploring these options? I mean, does it usually take something, I don't want to say catastrophic, but something significant to happen in their lives for them to need a change in not just, you know, physiological, but like just the psychology behind everything? Does that do you usually find that they're coming in at like a low point?
I would say most people, especially lifestyle, I will say are usually coming in at a very low point. Competitors, it's more like looking for the next best thing kind of thing. It's like, what do you have this person previously didn't? But with
Yeah.
lifestyle people, it's like they've probably already tried a million different things to get where they want to go, and they're probably still in pain. So they want it yesterday. If they wanted an Amazon Prime to their house like a week ago and it's late and they're not happy about that. So
Yeah.
for for them, it's definitely like they're still in pain in this, this body that doesn't feel like it's theirs and that they don't want to be in, which is very, very difficult to hold those feelings, like for a million different reasons that we could talk about. But just to answer your question, like absolutely, there is usually a low point, and there's a resistance to going into these pieces because usually to get out of the low point, like you need to accept that you're in it and you need to feel it fully, instead of
You
just
got to
like,
feel it to
no,
heal it, right?
yeah, yeah, and that's
Yeah,
why
it's
a few years ago we started seeing, like all of these like functional health was the big thing. It was like you need to fix your hormones, and you need to fix your gut health, and you need to fix, and like the underlying thing of all of that is stress management. Like
yeah.
it's not anything like new. Like sure you can like slap some chaseberry on it and call it a day, but like the biggest thing is going to come down to stress management and the way that you view yourself and like go through your life. So taking people through health phases is usually like this descent into all of the things that they've been pushing down and ignoring for so long. Yo-yo dietings, like fad diets, these like cardio bunnies who were doing HIIT cardio every single day, plus like weight training, 10 billion sets with 100 reps each. So it's like undoing or acknowledging that all of that was not the right direction for them and that actually their body is hurting, and now there are consequences of, not in a way that like you're being punished, but just in an actual sense of like, hey, like internally things are a little bit on fire right now.
And everything's connected too. So, I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
if you have repressed emotions and you have repressed feelings, say something significant is going on in your life and you just bury it and you just don't address it, that doesn't just go nowhere. That comes out. And in many instances, that will come out in a physical ailment. So you can have
Yeah,
anything from migraines to fibromyalgia to low back pain to shoulder pain to soft tissue tightness, you name it. There are all kinds of physiological things that can come up from not being in touch with what's in here. Um,
absolutely.
and so actually, that's something that I struggled with for a while. Actually, I ended up taking a full, I think it was like 8 or 9 months off of everything. This was like back early on in my career. And what my career? It wasn't a career. It wasn't. It was training. Wasn't even. I mean, I was just going to the gym, and I always wanted to be a bodybuilder. So, like, that was my goal. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it, and I was, making progress. And I'm trying to, what was going on in my life? I was doing something that I didn't love, and I was in a tough relationship at the time, and I just was masking it. Like I wasn't like addressing the problem, and I started having back pain. I don't have back pain, but I started having back pain. And when I tell you, it got so bad that I had to get like a new bed, like a special bed. I had to go through and I got well, first off, I stopped training because I went to the doctor and they were just like, here's what did they say? I think they prescribed me tramadol or something. They prescribed me something. because I was popping pills because I was in so much pain. And I quit training. I went to Mayo Clinic, and they just told me they couldn't find anything. There was nothing structurally, there was nothing. They diagnosed me with spinal stenosis, but if you know the body, every fucking spine looks barbaric. Every spine has imperfections in it. Like they're just looking for something to die. They're like, we can't figure out what is wrong with this guy. And so at this point, like I couldn't sleep. I was in so much pain. I was in pain 24/7. And I was thinking about it 24/7. And I was very depressed because I used to train, like I love training. I love building my body, and I had to stop that. And I just wanted to figure out a way to get back to that. I remember I would even go to the YMCA to swim like every morning because the swimming had no impact. So it was like I could move my body in the pool, and I would do that every morning before work. And so I ended up going through, I got 3 epidurals. So these fucking shots were so big. So they'd had to bring me in, they had to bust out an x-ray machine to jam this thing into my spine. And I was like, I would leave this was in Chicago, and I went through 3 different times because the max they can do in a year is 3 different times. And so they would have to wheel me out in a wheelchair. That's how bad that thing hurt. And nothing worked. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to have back pain. And when I say back pain, I mean debilitating back pain for the rest of my life. And I'm 20, I'm in my early 20s. I'm like, well, okay. So I was, I think this was when I got back from Mayo Clinic. Because I was on the road for in-home sales for my family business that I work for. And I would always have Sirius satellite radio going, and Howard Stern would be on. And so I would listen to interviews and just, guests that he would have on. And he started talking about back pain. And he started talking about how he had debilitating back pain to the point where he would be laying on his back doing his radio show, broadcasting his radio show, laying flat on his back. Cause if you have back pain, laying on the flat floor, feels good temporarily. And so he started talking about it, and he started talking about how he went to all these doctors and they were going to do surgery, but they couldn't find anything wrong structurally with his body. And then he started talking about this doctor by the name of Dr. Sarno. And Dr. Sarno specialized in something a term for it is called tension myositis syndrome, but what that really means is mind body syndrome. And so what this is a syndrome where your mind creates pain pathways where there is no actual injury. And the reason for this is to distract you from what is going on internally, what you're repressing, because you're repressing energy. And whether it be, that could be something big, could be something real big, could be, you're going through a divorce, could be going, a job change, whatever. I don't know that it has to be life-changing. I don't think that it does, but it's something that you're not addressing. And so he saw this doctor, and he started doing the different practices that this entails, none of which are invasive. It's all therapy work. So it's journaling, talking about, okay, what is going on in my life? Okay, well, this is clearly an issue. I haven't really been addressing that. And so addressing it and really kind of realizing that what you have going on is not a structural abnormality, and that it is in fact pain caused by the repressing of insert scenario. And wouldn't you know it, the pain went away for him. He didn't have back pain anymore. So I hear this and I'm relating to everything that he's saying. And so I immediately get the books, read those books. I don't read. I do not read. I read those books front to back. I think I did 2 days. I read 2 books. Like I fucking just read. And I'm like, highlight. I'm like, this all sounds like me. And they're all these, the people that get affected by this are people that want to do well. They're people that strive. The real A type personalities. They're people that strive to be good. They want to be liked. I mean, name a personality trait. I got it. Want to be liked. Want to do well. You whatever you're trying for, you give it your all. Like, so I'm like, everything is clicking. And so I start researching. Okay, I need to find like someone who specializes in this. So I find someone named Dr. John Strax. He's out of Chicago, and I go and I visit him, and he worked with Dr. Sarno. Dr. Sarno's now passed, but he worked under Dr. Sarno. Dr. Sarno is like the godfather of this stuff. And so I met with Dr. Strax in the city, and he laid it all out for me. I mean, he kind of talked to me, got to know me. We drew everything out on the board. He goes, "Oh yeah, dude." He didn't say dude, but he goes, yes. Like this is what you have going on. And I'm like, fucking A. Like at this point, I'm desperate. At this point, I'm like, because I'm a skeptic to the highest degree too. Like you tell me you see ghosts, I'm gonna say, show me proof. And I'm gonna point out every which way that you did not see an actual ghost. Like I'm really skeptical when it's like sometimes like I'm a buzzkill when it comes to like people will talk about like horoscopes and stuff like that. I'm a real buzzkill to be around with that stuff because I'm always trying to pick out the flaws in that. And so but at this point I'm like desperate. Like I will do anything to not be in pain again and to get back to my life. And so I started doing all of the stuff that he asked me to do, which is journaling and just going to therapy and addressing what was going on in my life. And wouldn't you know it, he goes, "I want you to get back to the gym." I said, "I can go back to the gym?" He goes, these doctors have been telling me I can't do that. He's like, "I want you to go back to the gym." And he goes, "And when you feel pain, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your back." He goes, "We've looked at all this. You've had every test. There's nothing wrong with your back. I want you to go to the gym." So I hired a trainer, went to the gym, and within a couple of weeks, I was pain-free. No more pain. Back to building muscle and back to getting my life back to the way that I wanted it. And ever since then, because this was a long time ago. This was like, God, this was maybe like 2009 or 10 or something like that. Like 2011. So this was a long time ago. And ever since then, I've tried to, I've had multiple things come up where this has happened in different forms. Could be shoulder pain, could be, and when I say pain, it's like no different than, you have like a tweak or something. And like normally, let's say you ever tweak your shoulder in the gym and you go, "Okay, I tweaked my shoulder, but within 24 to 48 hours, this will be gone." Like, yeah, normal, totally normal. Well, the pain, your mind just goes, "Oh, boom, that is a perfect distraction. What is going to cause this person to focus on pain more than what's going on in their life?" So it's your brain trying to protect you. It's trying to help you. It's trying to give you a distraction so you don't have to deal with this other stuff that's going on in your life. So it's this weird way of protecting you. And so like you could have a shoulder tweak or whatever, and then that's all it needs. And that will last indefinitely. Now you have that for the rest of your life. And people will go their whole lives with that. And it just gets more intense and more intense. So I've had things come up, and I'm able to kind of at this point have so much experience with it that I'm able to point it out, and I'm able to know what's going on. Not that I haven't had to go back and see Dr. Strax from time to time, but I know how to manage that. And I've been able to point that out in people, because it's really obvious when you have gone through this, and when you've helped people who have gone through this, and when you've been part of, I mean, I've gone to Midwestern and done talks on it and spoken with many, many people. Because I always remember thinking like, I researched it to death, and I couldn't find anyone talking on it, and I couldn't find anyone relatable talking on it too. Like, I would have killed to have seen like a bodybuilder or someone talking about this publicly, but I couldn't find it. So I would like always go to like Midwestern every 12 weeks and do talks at like for groups over there of Dr. Strax patients. But I've been able to point that out in athletes, colleagues, in just people in general. And I've been able to help people with that. And kind of, it comes in many forms. And as I'm saying this, you're probably thinking like, fuck, that makes sense. Like, you've seen this in people. Like, you can, I was at a charity event last month, and there was a guy talking on stage, and the charity event was for special needs dogs that go to people who have ailments or whatever, you know, could be PTSD, whatever. They get these special needs dogs. And this guy was up there, and he had his dog up there, and he was talking about how he had chronic pain, fibromyalgia, all these different things, how he'd been to all these different doctors, and no one knows what's wrong with him. They can't find anything, no evidence of anything. Yet he's in all of this pain 24/7. So much so that he had to quit work, and he needs the dog, and the dog's what brings him joy. Been to the Mayo Clinic. And so I'm sitting there in the audience, because it happens like once every 5 to 6 years, I'll say, where someone will be, I'll be in whatever. It could be any scenario, name a scenario. It just randomly happens. And someone starts talking, and you go, fuck, I have this information. I feel guilty now. Like, I feel like a personal responsibility that I have to address that. Like, I have to bring that up. Like, I have to give that information. Other words, I don't feel good about myself. So this guy's up there talking, and I'm like, God damn, like, this guy's totally got, I'm certain of it. I'm certain of it. Like, I know what to look for. I know when these things are happening. So I went and I got his information. You know, I didn't want to bombard him at the charity event, but I went and I got his information. I shot him an email after the event. I talked to someone to get his information. So it's one of those things that it's just very common. And so I think sometimes people don't know or aren't fully open to like how interconnected like the mind, mental health, and the body are.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, thank you so much for sharing your story there too. Like, I really appreciate like you being open about that, because I definitely agree that like a lot of people probably have that experience and could benefit from opening the ideas as something maybe they haven't thought about yet. That could be the root, which is kind of like why I was really interested in using training as a movement practice, because like in training, when we're training hard, we are purposefully bringing ourselves into a more quote unquote painful state. Like when you're having a really hard set, like there are a lot of feelings that are very, very similar to, for example, like anxiety. Like your chest gets a little bit tighter, you know, your like blood pressure is raised, you have these really intense sensations in your chest and the muscle group that you're training. So being able to like walk into those and be like, okay, like these are going to happen. I'm in control of what's going on here. I can choose how far I do or do not push. And then being able to just stay present with those pieces, you can start to bring that new capacity into the outside. You can start to bring that into your life as well, which is why I'm a huge proponent of like bringing the feminine into training, bringing your training experience, and then observing and witnessing what is going on at the same time. Like it's really interesting that these feelings are coming up. That like this is a really strong sensation. Like, can I hold this? Am I okay with this? How do I feel about this? What is my internal? What does the whole landscape look like? So when you go with it in that route, like there's an entire little world that you have in your own training, like with each set. So instead of just like, okay, like I have a set of 8 to do for now, it's like, oh, like there are 8 completely different reps that are going to have completely different experiences. And that's really cool. Like, I can't wait.
So it sounds like training has taken on new life for you, and that
Absolutely. Yeah.
it sounds like even when you're talking about it, your so your demeanor and like your face and your expressions are so different than when you were talking about how training was before. So you can tell like your face is lighting up, you're smiling, you could see the passion, and it sounds like training is a joyful thing again for you.
Yeah, it's more of an adventure, like we were talking about, which
Mm-hmm.
is instead of like how the movie has to end kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'm curious what kind of movie I'm gonna watch today. Like, and just like allowing that to be okay. Like some
Mm-hmm.
sessions are quote unquote better than others. Like sometimes I hit PR, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's like an isolation day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can have really intense like intensifiers, like drop sets and muscle rounds and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But just like allowing all of those to be possibilities and not having them mean anything about me as a person or about like my journey as a bodybuilder or anything like that. That has
Mm-hmm.
been a very big difference for me and also how I coach my athletes. And I would say that we're doing a pretty great job with an approach like this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. It's always it's when you have a certain standard, which you obviously do, you hold yourself to the highest standard, which is why you're such a great athlete and such a great coach. But that does add a lot of pressure to things. So being able to like maintain that standard, like you still have the standard, but by shifting your approach and perspective, it seems to have made all of the difference. And I think such an important such an important part of being an athlete is being able to know when something's working and know when something's not working. And sometimes knowing when something's not working is like, okay, I've had enough. Like this is enough, like you almost have to suffer to a certain extent where it's like you have to be like, okay, like I'm willing to move on now because
Hmm.
I'm not going to suffer like this anymore. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that like that bad experience leads to like some of those lows, kind of just like we're talking about. Like I was just telling with that story, like some of those lows, if you can keep going and not give up, really lead to the highest highs, and
Yeah.
just get and there is something to be said for just being able to pull yourself out of like a low, which I think makes a great coach. I don't I don't think great coaches come from no adversity. I don't,
Yeah.
I think maybe some people don't talk about it. Like for me, I like to talk about stuff when I'm out of it. I have things that I've gone through and I have had lows. I don't really talk about them when I'm going through them. Like it's not that I don't talk about them. I don't um publicly talk about them. And then when I overcome it, because I will overcome it, like that's whatever it is, I will overcome it. Then I tend to talk about, okay, this is what happened. This was my experience. And then this is how I got through it. And I think people learn a lot from that kind of stuff. Like I bet your athletes really learn a lot from your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps to know that they're not alone with it, that like they're not broken, contrary to what they might think, or
Yeah.
like have read from someone else about how they need to be or how they need to like the mindset that they're supposed to have
Hmm.
is in dissonance with what they currently experience. Like, hey, like this is okay. Like this is
Hmm.
like literally a space for growth. So I would say, like, if I had to sum up my coaching, it's like I know everyone talks about like tunnel vision, right? Like tunnel vision towards the this, and like you block out all of the noise. I would say that the way that I coach is it's spacious, it's
Hmm.
open. We take the blinders off. We look at all the things. Like I have learned to be able to hold whatever experience my clients may or may not have in relation to their fitness journey and not try to change it because I'm the one that's weak, too weak to hold it. Like I'm not. Like I'm able to, talk about like the eating disorders and the body dysmorphia and the like I hate training right now. Like all of those are okay options.
Hmm.
And if I deny them that, then like I'm denying them their own experience. And that's just not happening. So I would say like in a
There's,
nutshell, the coaching is
yeah,
more
there's,
expansive than it is contractive.
and there's so, like you said, like there's so many avenues to this stuff. There's so many rabbit holes to go down and so many topics, and each topic is so nuanced. Everything is so different for each person. I do think we could talk about a lot of different stuff, but I do want to keep things to a tight timeline. I think I think we really talked about a lot of good stuff. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this information publicly. Like I've really been interested in your whole shift, and I've seen kind of where you're coming from, and so I'm really happy for you and proud of you, and it seems like you found kind of an approach that just is bringing you a lot of joy, and I'm really happy for you. Do you have anything that you would like to promote? I'm gonna have like your social media information up here the whole time, but is there any websites or where can people find you, and what do you have coming out, and what can they look for?
Yeah, so just Instagram. I'm very lazy with the social media platform. Sorry, guys. So just Instagram at Lexa Rukstela. It's just my name. And I just want to offer something to your listeners too. I've done some free masculine and feminine challenges, like immersions into like how you can start addressing some of these pieces in like real time, real life scenarios. So if anyone listening would like that, they can just kind of pop in my DMs and I will send them over to you for free. Both of them get a lot of really great information. There's probably like 3 hours of like me speaking and teaching. So you get a lot, a lot out of that. So if
That's
anyone's
awesome.
interested in that, they can absolutely just reach out for that information. Other than that, just coaching right now.
And then any papers? I know you
Oh yes,
publish. You got anything that you're working on?
we're waiting on the peer review for one paper on a case study for a bikini athlete. Other than that, there is a systematic review that I was on with Brad Schoenfeld and Eric Helms, going over all of the case studies of bodybuilders that have currently come out. That came out earlier this year. We can link that one in the show notes too, if you'd like. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
my own first author paper is comparing evidence-based strategies for bodybuilding compared to what the current bodybuilding athletes, I'm sorry, coaches are doing. So it's a really interesting anecdote meets science. So you get to see what the top coaches in the IFBB and NPC are doing to get their massive athletes massive if you're interested.
That is awesome. Well, thank you again, Lexa. It was a joy having you on. I'm glad we got to talk face to face
Yeah,
over Zoom and go over some of this stuff. So, all right, we'll talk again really soon.
absolutely. Thank you, Mikey.